All right, so picture this, right? You're strapped into a roller coaster and your heart's pounding as the train inches its way up, up, up that huge hill. And you hear the clanking of the chain
Oh, yeah.
and the nervous laughter all around
Oh,
you.
for sure.
And it all kind of builds to that one moment at the crest, that pure anticipation, and then for a breath, nothing. And suddenly, whoosh, you're plunging, twisting, turning, just a blur.
Yeah.
We all know that rush. Right.
Oh, yeah. It's so good.
So today on the deep dive, we're peeling back the layers on that. We're going to understand exactly what's happening in those crazy seconds. We're going deep into the physics of roller coasters.
Yeah.
Consider it your backstage pass to the science of screams.
Exactly. Exactly. We've got an awesome article here that unpacks all the science behind these incredible machines.
Okay, cool.
Our goal is to really go beyond just those surface level thrills and really try to get to grips with the fundamental physics at play. Think of this as your shortcut to understanding the science that makes those drops and loops possible.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so these amazing rides, where'd they even come from? They feel like they've been around forever. A timeless source of that, I don't know, butterflies in your stomach feeling.
It's fascinating, that desire for that thrill, that feeling. It's nothing new. We can trace it all the way back to 16th century Russia, believe it or not.
Wow.
Massive high slides. They were called Russian mountains.
Okay.
And people would just zoom down them on sleds.
Well, yeah.
Even in that really early form, that icy form, you can see the fundamental appeal of speed and gravity taking hold, right?
Right.
This highlights how long humans have been drawn to that sensation of controlled descent.
Wow, that's wild. Ice slides. That's quite a jump to, the towering steel beasts we see today.
Right.
So how did we get from frozen slopes to, like, the King Da Ka? What happened there?
Right. Well, if we kind of connect this to the bigger picture, the real evolution, I think, started in America with the gravity switchback railway at Coney Island in 1884. Now, this first American coaster was pretty tame by today's standards. It only topped out at 6 miles an hour.
Wow, that's so slow.
Right.
Yeah.
But it captured the public's imagination. It was a novel experience, And from there, I think, driven by both, advancements in physics and engineering, we saw this steady climb literally towards the incredible speeds and heights that we see on modern steel coasters, like King Da Ka and Formula Rossa.
6 miles per hour, that's almost like quaint compared to what we experience now. So
Yeah.
what are the core scientific principles that govern these modern day thrill rides?
Well, it all boils down to, those fundamental laws of motion, Newton's 3 laws of motion. They're really the bedrock of understanding how a roller coaster moves, how it generates those forces that give us that unique feeling.
Okay, Newton's laws, the fundamental rules of motion.
Yeah.
So let's break it down. How do they play out on a coaster? So first up, let's talk inertia. Newton's first law. How does that come into the picture on a ride?
All right, well, think about when the roller coaster train reaches that very peak of that first big hill.
Okay.
For a split second, it almost feels like it pauses, right?
Yes.
And then as it starts its descent, there's no engine pushing it. So that initial reluctance to move, that tendency to just want to stay at rest before gravity takes over, that's inertia. The train wants to stay in its state of motion, or lack thereof in this case. And the momentum that it builds on the way up, it actually helps to carry it just over the crest before gravity really takes over.
I see.
It's that almost stuck feeling that you get right before you plunge.
Oh, I recognize that. It's like the coaster's taking a deep breath before the big drop.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, now what about Newton's second law? Force equals mass times acceleration, or FMA. How does that translate to the coaster experience?
Right, so ESMA basically tells us that a greater force acting on an object will result in a greater acceleration. And on a roller coaster, the main force that we're dealing with during those drops is gravity. So taller hills actually mean a greater distance over which a gravity can act. And that results in a larger net force on the train. And this increased force leads to greater acceleration, which is why those huge drops generate those incredible speeds. The height isn't just for the view, it's directly impacting how fast you accelerate.
So the size of these modern coasters, it's not just for bragging rights. It's fundamentally linked to how fast you're going to be hurled downwards.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, and Newton's third law. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Where do we feel that one most acutely on a roller coaster?
You feel it most directly during those turns and loops. So when the train suddenly changes direction, your body wants to keep going straight because of inertia, right?
Right.
So you end up pushing against your seat. But Newton's third law says that the seat pushes back on you with an equal and opposite force. This reaction force is super important. It's what keeps you in your seat. It stops you from flying out, especially when you're upside down.
Yeah.
That pressure you feel during a tight turn, that's Newton's third law in action, keeping you safe.
That's definitely a comforting thought when you're hanging upside down.
Right.
So the coaster's motion, it's this dance of all these forces, but it's also a constant exchange of energy, isn't it? Like potential becoming kinetic and back again.
Exactly. The entire ride is essentially a dynamic energy transformation show.
Mhm.
So, as that train is being pulled up that first massive hill, it's gaining gravitational potential energy. Think of it as stored energy, right? The
Mhm.
higher it goes, the more potential energy it has.
Yeah.
The formula PE equals mgh captures this beautifully.
Yeah.
It shows us that potential energy is directly proportional to the height.
So that clanking ascent, it's not just a slow climb, it's actually storing up all this energy for the thrilling release that's coming.
Yeah, it's like winding up a giant spring.
Okay, so then you crest that first hill and all that stored energy. What happens to it?
That's where the fun begins. As the train starts to plummet downwards, all that potential energy, it starts to convert into kinetic energy, which is the energy of motion.
Okay.
And the formula for that is Ke equals 1/2 mv squared. And the steeper and longer the drop, the more potential energy gets converted into kinetic energy, which is why you reach your maximum speed at the bottom of that first drop.
So that sudden surge of speed, that's kinetic energy unleashed. And you're at the bottom, and then often, whoosh, you shoot back up another hill or into a loop. Where does the energy for that come from?
That's where the law of conservation of energy comes in. So in a perfect system where there's no energy loss, the total energy would always stay the same. Now, obviously, in the real world, friction and air resistance steal a little bit of energy.
Okay.
But for the most part, that initial potential energy that you get from that first climb is what propels the train through the rest of the ride.
Hmm.
And it keeps transforming back and forth between potential energy when you go uphill and kinetic energy when you go downhill. And this is why, in theory, a roller coaster wouldn't actually need an engine after that initial lift.
Okay, that makes sense. So gravity is kind of the invisible hand that's starting this whole energy exchange, right? It's always pulling the train downwards.
Exactly. Gravity is like the conductor of this thrilling symphony. It's the force that's responsible for accelerating the train during those drops and converting that stored potential energy into that speed that we feel as kinetic energy.
And we've all had that feeling on those big drops where it feels like your stomach is floating up to your throat. What's going on there? What's the physics behind that feeling of weightlessness?
That's the fascinating effect of free fall and what we call negative g-forces.
Okay.
When the train starts going down at a rate that's the same as or even faster than the acceleration due to gravity, which is 9.8 meters per second squared, you experience that weightlessness. It's similar to what astronauts feel in orbit, where they're constantly in free fall around Earth.
Wow.
Your body is essentially falling at the same rate as the train, so you don't feel that normal upward force from your seat.
Okay.
Instead of feeling pushed into your seat, you actually feel that release, that momentary floaty feeling.
So it's less magic and more physics.
Exactly.
I love it. Okay, what about those loops? How does the coaster manage to stay on the track, and how do we not fall out when we're upside down? It feels like magic sometimes.
Well, it's all thanks to a force called centripetal force. So as the train goes into a loop, there's a force pulling it inwards towards the center of that circular path. And this inward force is what keeps the train on the track, keeps it from veering off. The formula for centripetal force is Fc equals mv squared over r. And it tells us that this force depends on the train's mass, its velocity, and the radius of the loop. And for riders to stay in their seats at the top of the loop, when they're upside down, the g-forces have to be greater than gravity. So that feeling of being pressed into your seat during a loop, it's not just a sensation. It's actually a carefully engineered force that's keeping you safe.
So it's precise calculation to make sure we stay where we should be. Now, not all forces on a coaster are about making that crazy motion. Some are for slowing things down, right? Like friction and air resistance.
Right. Precisely. While we tend to focus on the thrilling parts, there are forces working against the coaster, too. Even with super smooth steel tracks, you still have friction. And that creates resistance, and it slowly dissipates the train's kinetic energy, turns it into heat.
And what about air resistance? I feel like that's something we all feel, especially on those high-speed straightaways.
Exactly. The faster the train goes, the more air has to push out of the way. And that creates drag. And that's why a lot of high-speed coasters are designed to be really aerodynamic. They try to minimize that resistance so they can go faster.
Makes sense. Of course, eventually every ride has to come to an end.
Yeah.
So what are the things in place that bring these speeding trains to a halt?
Well, there are all sorts of braking systems. Older roller coasters often used friction brakes where they physically clamp down on the train to slow it down.
Okay.
But a lot of modern coasters now use magnetic brakes.
Okay.
These are much smoother, and they use a principle called eddy currents, which is essentially electromagnetic resistance. So as the train passes through a magnetic field, it creates these currents that oppose the motion, and that's what slows it down.
Wow. Very high tech and smooth.
Yeah, it's a much more elegant way to stop.
Definitely a much more elegant way to stop, especially after all that.
For sure.
Now, let's shift gears a little bit. Beyond all the physics, there's a big psychological aspect of why we love roller coasters, why we find them so thrilling.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a whole other fascinating side to this.
So what's going on in our brains when we're on these rides?
Well, that anticipation, as you climb that first hill, that feeling of perceived danger, it all triggers our fight or flight response.
Right.
And that floods our system with adrenaline and dopamine.
Well, that's why I feel so good after I get off.
Exactly. It's those neurochemicals that create those feelings of excitement and exhilaration, even a sense of pleasure after the threat has passed, so to speak.
And some people, not everyone, but some people, get motion sickness. What's happening there?
Motion sickness on a roller coaster or even in a car or a boat happens when there's a conflict in the sensory information that your brain is receiving.
Okay.
So your eyes might be telling you one thing, like, you're looking at the track ahead, but your inner ear, which controls balance, is sensing something totally different. And that mismatch is what causes that dizziness and nausea.
So it's like our senses can't agree. And coaster designers are really good at playing with those expectations, aren't they? The sharp turns, the backward launches, the dark tunnels.
Oh, absolutely. Those unexpected elements, they add surprise and uncertainty, and they make the ride even more thrilling. By messing with what we expect, they make the ride feel way more intense.
It's an art form, this blend of physics and psychology.
Right.
What does the future hold for the world of roller coasters? What's next?
We're seeing some awesome new stuff already. Launch coasters, for example, they use powerful magnets, things like linear induction motors and linear synchronous motors.
Wow.
And these can propel the trains to insane speeds much faster than a traditional chain lift. It's like being shot out of a cannon.
That's a wild. I love those. And it seems like they're always trying to push the boundaries of size and speed. What are some of the record holders right now?
Well, as of today, Formula Rasa in the UAE is the fastest roller coaster in the world. It goes a crazy 149 miles an hour.
What? That's so fast.
King Dakar in the U.S. is the tallest, standing at a massive 456 feet. And for the longest, it's Steel Dragon 2000 in Japan, with a track over 8,133 feet long.
Wow, those numbers are mind-blowing. And it feels like technology is becoming part of the ride itself.
Right.
What about virtual reality roller coasters?
Yeah, virtual reality or VR is a super cool and rapidly developing area. By giving riders VR headsets that sync up perfectly with the coaster's movements, designers can create these totally new immersive experiences.
Good.
Imagine feeling that drop in your stomach and seeing yourself plummet down a virtual cliff. The possibilities are endless.
Sounds amazing. As we wrap up, what's the big takeaway about the physics of roller coasters?
The key is that roller coasters are this incredible intersection of physics, engineering, and psychology. They use things like Newton's laws, energy transformations, gravity, and centripetal force to create these thrilling and safe experiences.
Yeah.
It's amazing how they take those fundamental ideas and turn them into something so fun.
It really is. And it makes you think about all the other seemingly ordinary experiences that actually have cool science behind them. So next time you're on a roller coaster, don't just think about the adrenaline rush. Take a moment to appreciate the incredible physics that are making it all happen. What other everyday things might be hiding such fascinating science? Think about it.
That's a great question for all our listeners out there.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.
See you there.